So my first serious relationship was severely abusive. Obviously, similar to you, I'd grown up thinking that's normal, that's what I'm supposed to be, that's how love is.
Mhm.
I was abusive from the start. Like I didn't realize. I find it funny because I'm just like looking back now. My self-esteem was so low that I thought that was the best I was going to get, and I was like,
Mm.
God, I'm so lucky. I must behave. I must do what I'm told. I must do X, Y, and Z. And it came to a point on Boxing Day when he nearly killed me, and I ran out in my pajamas down my
Mm.
road to try and get away, and ended up running into my neighbor's house to just try not to be killed. That I
Wow.
thought I can't do this anymore. So it was quite clear to me by that point what an unhealthy relationship was, but that was literally only through friends,
Mm.
sort of online content. Other than that, I would have just assumed this is, this is normal. Relationships have conflict, and sometimes conflicts escalate to being beaten up. That's
Mm.
standard. That's literally how my brain was thinking.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I am very grateful for social media, because that has been such a space for me to get educated on things like that. Particularly, for example, slightly pivot, but when I was 17, I was raped, and I it was like, you know quite a serious situation. He tried to knock me unconscious. There was a lot of blood. It was
Mm.
and I still came away from that situation thinking, maybe that was just a bad experience. Maybe I didn't, at that point, I told my friend the next morning, and she said, we need to report it. I would never have used the word rape next to it the next morning. I would never have used
Mm.
that. But looking back, thinking I was screaming no the whole time, I've still got injuries as a result of what happened. I was knocked unconscious, and I was like, oh yeah, it's definitely rape. I'm allowed to use that word. But it was
Mhm.
actually a talk at my school that alerted me to the fact that that's what it was. So it was through
Sure.
education in that sense. So yeah, so going back to that abusive relationship, I didn't know when I was in it that that was the case. It was sort of the last year, and I wrote a list of everything that he was doing, and I was like, I'm going to give him three chances. Obviously that never happened. It was far more than that. But
Mhm.
it took me a long time to believe that I would survive without him, and survive without having somebody else there, and financially survive, because nobody ever talks about that part of things. I have a house, I have a dog, my jobs are freelance, I don't have
Mm.
a set income. I had to give him an awful lot of money for him to leave. He stayed in my house for 6 weeks after we broke up, and I had to pay him out, basically. So there
Mm.
was a lot to have to comprehend. And I will commend anybody, male or female, who gets out of a situation like that, because there is so much strength involved in removing yourself from
Yeah.
those situations.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I really appreciate you for bearing a lot of this out here for us to listen and learn from. Um, just thinking about like the totality of what you're saying, having these unhealthy relationships and the way people are misusing you and mistreating you, and thinking about again where it started, right? I can
Mm,
never, this never escapes my mind. The way that we grow up and the way we're raised sets those expectations, sets sort of those standards, right, of what we feel like our self-worth is, what we'll put up with, essentially.
yeah,
And then when you describe what you said, like I definitely can relate to my first relationship, but thinking about the fact that you thought that it was okay, you're like, yeah,
yeah,
that sounds like it's about right. And then looking back now, you're like, no, there's no way I would tolerate that, there's no way I
mm,
would put up with that, because I deserve better. But that goes to show that's where our worth was at that time. Maybe now we're
yeah,
here, but then we were like down here somewhere thinking, yeah, this is totally acceptable.
yeah,
Even if I don't like it, even if I don't like the decisions that you're making, the choices that you're making, the way that you're treating me, I still think that, like you said, that's the best that I can do.
yeah.
I think it's important to, to distinguish those for those of us that are listening. But also when you're thinking about the totality of those relationships now and sort of how things would be different, I'm curious. So I imagine you're in a much healthier place now.
Mm.
How would you define somewhat how your relationship is shaped now? How do you deal with him now? How do you navigate that relationship now?
So after I broke up with my abusive ex, I flinged into a love bombing situation where he wasn't abusive, but it didn't mean it wasn't toxic. And he completely love bombed me. I was totally like, oh my God, this is amazing. But in reality, he would just disappear for days, and I'd be like, oh, it's okay though, he's not hurting me. Um, and it was then he completely out of the blue Snapchatted me saying it was over, basically. And I
Wow.
was in shock. I just completely was when I didn't cope at all. And I went into this really dark part of my life
Mm,
for 6 weeks. It was pretty much 6 weeks on the dot. I have a theory about the 6 week rule after relationships. And I then ended up having a year on my own. So I'm tying this in. This will, bear with me here.
mm,
That year on my own was, and probably will always be, the my most favorite experience of my life. I learned to love myself. I took myself out to the cinema. I took myself to the zoo, to aquariums, to theme parks on my own, to have picnics in my car, reading books, learned to dance, did an astrology diploma, all of this stuff for me. I redecorated my whole house on my own, made all my furniture on my own, and documented all of this on Instagram, which is obviously my social place. I love it there. Everyone's
mhm.
great. And I just developed this sense of independence, but not like we were saying earlier, not don't need anybody. This sense of I'm so comfortable with who I am. If somebody really good comes in, it would take that for me to want to give up that time.
Right.
Um, and then Alex, who's my current boyfriend, who is brilliant. We actually knew each other from when I was in a bad way, so it was really weird that
Um,
we tied back in together. So the approach I had then, it was a brilliant friend of mine, was like, it's not about how he feels about you, it's how you feel about him. So it wasn't about me sat there going, I need him to like me, I need him to like me, I need him to like me. It was like, oh, do I like him enough? Am I going to give him my time? And not in a sort of feministy, oh, I hate men kind of way, but in a sort of, I believe in myself enough to know that I don't need somebody else here. I want to choose them to be here. It was more, I don't need you, I want you.
mhm.
Um, and we built our relationship off the first way through being like, no, 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 we're not anything. He's very similar to me in that, oh no, I'm independent, but if somebody comes along, they have to be really good for me to give up this time. So it was
Right,
this
right.
beautiful sort of, we were hanging out, we were like, oh, we're nothing more than just sleeping together. That's all it is. We're just, and we're going for walks together and we're watching films together, but it's nothing more. So it wasn't like we weren't trying to, oh, he needs to like me, I need his approval, I need his
Yeah.
admiration. It was like, oh, I guess I kind of like hanging out with this person, to the point where it was like, I actually prefer my life hanging out with him than I do on my own. And I thought I'd never say that after that year on my own. So
Yeah.
it was, to be honest, and I think it's really key the way you go into these relationships. It was the initial approach that I think put me in good stead and stopped me from having this codependency,
Mhm.
on needing that approval and needing that admiration from him, and also our ability to communicate straight up how we feel. And that's something that he is excellent at. He's such a phenomenal communicator. He will tell me the absolute truth even when I don't want to hear it, even though it's the last thing I want to hear. He'll say it how it is. And in the past I would have really struggled with that, and now I say, I'm not enjoying this. I don't like the way you talk to me. I don't think we should talk about this right now. I need some time to cool down. Whereas before I'd been like, oh my God, if I say this, he's going to break up with me. I can't do it. So it's literally, I think it's all about the approach,
Yes.
really, rather than, obviously the person has to be fab and completely on the same level.
Mhm.
But if you both have that level headed, healthy approach, I really believe that it's possible. And I sit here now and I don't talk about, oh, forever and ever, and he's my forever person and I won't be able to cope without him. I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'm really enjoying having this person in my life. If that's not forever, that's okay, I'll be fine, but I love having him here. So yeah.
No, that's very well said, very well spoken. Especially that last part about the way that we approach the relationships. I couldn't agree
Mm,
more. I think it's important for us to be in a very emotional, stable space before we leap into these situations. But I
yeah.
find that for different reasons, maybe we're trying to escape pain, maybe we're trying to escape heartache or loneliness, we'll just jump into relationships for those reasons. But that doesn't give us the right foundation, if you will, to ensure as long as possible that we can have a successful long-term relationship, possible
Mhm.
marriage, if that's what you're looking for. But we don't always connect those dots. We're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with being by myself now because I'm very lonely and I'd rather have somebody there. So let me just jump into the first thing I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
Or the first person, as you said previously with the love bombing, the first person that's saying they love me or they make time for me or what have you after my previous relationship, and not even realizing, I would say, this is my opinion, personal opinion, I don't really consider that to be real. I
Mm.
consider that to be sort of fantasizing what we think it should be, and because somebody says the words,
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
that we create the rest of the narrative, we create the rest of the story to say, oh yeah,
Absolutely.
man, it must be this might be my forever person because they just said the things that I really wanted to hear,
Yeah.
not even realizing maybe I was giving them all the hints and all the signs to say these things to me, to patronize me,
Yeah.
to really feed me that information, even though they may not genuinely feel that way because maybe we haven't even known each other that long, but
Mm.
I'm going to give it all to you because I want you to feel so special.
Yeah.
And the point of that is that we don't build the relationship on the right foundation. And
Yeah.
again, I think so much about the outcome.